and John Hardie, a Russian program deputy director of Foundations for Defense of Democracies. Good morning, gentlemen.
Good to be here.
All right, the day is finally here. I'm going to start with you, John, just based on your experience with respect to Russia and your research. What do you expect to see from Vladimir Putin today based on past negotiations as well as past meetings? Do you think we will reach some sort of ceasefire agreement, or in terms of his behavior, we'll probably know within the first 2 minutes if it's good or bad, but what do you make of it?
Well, thanks for having me on. I think it's important to keep expectations reasonable. It's pretty doubtful this summit alone will lead to a ceasefire or final settlement. We know that Vladimir Putin remains fixated on these very maximalist demands, including conditioning just an initial ceasefire, not even a final agreement, but an initial ceasefire on a large-scale Ukrainian withdrawal from territory that Russia has been unable to capture by military force. So President Trump will have his work cut out for him. I think the name of the game is trying to convince Putin that peace just isn't going to happen as long as he remains wedded to these non-starter demands. So I'm looking to see what kind of pressure President Trump will bring to bear to start whittling down the Russian leader.
Fred, as a former CIA analyst, I know there's a lot of psychological profiling goes on with leaders. And we know Mr. Putin's been out there. He has to save face some way or another, not only for internal politics, but also the external world and, projecting strength. How much of his ability or desire to save face plays into this negotiation and further negotiations?
I think that's an important aspect of what's going on here. Look, I think the psychological analysis of Trump is being done by the Russians, and they realize that if Putin comes to Alaska prepared to play games and drag his feet, Trump's going to walk away, and it's going to result in very damaging energy and economic sanctions on Russia. I think the question is Putin going to offer a deal that Trump and the Europeans and Ukraine can accept? Will he drop some of his maximal demands? And I think that also Putin is looking for a face-saving way out, and Trump's going to make the case that he is the only leader on the world stage, perhaps ever, who will offer such a deal to Putin. So Trump has to see, is Putin really ready to pursue such a deal? And if not, this won't be a very long summit.
Exactly. And John, in terms of what we're seeing with respect to that deal, we're hearing some reports that there could be some minerals aspect to this. We could be providing Russia with some rare earth minerals. We certainly did that with Ukraine, as well as maybe, quite possibly, Russia rejoining the G7, becoming the G8 again. Are you hearing, claims about that? And do you believe they're well-founded?
So I think the Trump administration's approach from the beginning has been to kind of present a mix of carrots and sticks. So on the one hand, if there is a peace agreement, the administration has said it will remove sanctions. It'll pursue economic cooperation with the Russians. And then, of course, President Trump has been using the stick of economic punishment. We saw the secondary tariffs on India over purchases of Russian oil. I would hope that if there's not a good outcome today, President Trump will continue down that path, using the various sanctions and tariff tools at his disposal, go after China, Russia's biggest purchaser of oil.
Yeah, Fred, so as we know, Europe's not part of this meeting, and they've been urging President Trump to stand firm against President Putin. President Trump appears to be taking that advice. Take a listen.
Will Russia face any consequences if Vladimir Putin does not agree to stop the war after your meeting on Friday?
Yes, they will. Yeah.
What will the consequences
There will be
be?
consequences.
Sanctions, tariffs?
There will be, I don't have to say, there will be very severe consequences.
So, Fred, what will be the severe consequences if Putin doesn't want to play for peace?
Well, first, I think Trump deserves a great deal of credit listening to the Europeans, who have been doing nothing but whine and criticize him for holding this summit. Trump took their views on board. I don't know if he agreed with everything the Europeans want, the same with Zelensky, but he did listen. I think Trump's going to immediately implement very crippling energy sanctions, which will include secondary sanctions against nations that buy oil and gas from Russia. And this is going to have a significant effect on an economy that is already teetering. And if that does not work, Trump will turn to even more damaging economic sanctions, which could include seizing Russian economic assets worldwide. This is something Putin wants to avoid, which is why I think he decided to ask for this summit.
Mm-hmm. John, talk about the next steps here. So they first have this meeting, then likely a joint press conference immediately after. I know there's some lunches potentially with the Kremlin chief investment officer as well. And then also President Trump saying he's going to be immediately calling the European Union leaders, maybe Zelensky. Can you just give us a little bit of an outline as to what's to expect in the future days and future hours later today?
I think a lot of it depends on how the meeting goes. If it goes well, we could see a joint press conference. And I think Trump will brief the Zelensky and the European leaders. He's committed to do that. I would go back earlier to this week. I think that the coordination has been pretty good between all the different parties. I think they're going in on the same page in terms of pressing the Russians for a ceasefire, not giving away Ukrainian territory without some sort of reciprocal concession from the Russians. So I would expect that coordination will continue after the summit's over. And we'll see what happens with a potential trilateral with Zelensky included. I would expect the Russians will continue to resist that. Putin wants to basically strike a deal with the United States and then get Trump's help in imposing that on Ukraine. I do not expect or hope that President Trump will go along with that. So we'll just have to see if he's able to prevail upon the Russian autocrat and convince him to start dealing directly with Zelensky.
Fred, you made a reference before, and I want to follow up on it. What kind of internal pressure is Putin feeling, either from their economy? What's the state of the economy? What's the state of public opinion to the extent we know about it, to the extent that they do polling or whatever? But is there any internal pressure on Putin to make peace and stop this war?
The country has become more and more autocratic during this war. Russians are losing their rights. If you do the wrong search on the internet, you get arrested. There's large numbers of war dead. There's damage to the economy. The Russian government is trying to keep down any dissent over this, but it's there. And the Russian economy can't maintain this war indefinitely. They're getting some aid from China, but not enough that Russia needs. They're not getting cash from China. Russia's burning through its cash reserves to run this war. Russia could eventually win this war if Putin really wants to ruin the country. But I think Trump offers Putin a way out. And as you said earlier, maybe joining the G8, maybe a new relationship with the United States to deal with crises and international issues worldwide. It's a bright future for Russia if Putin makes a deal with Trump, and Trump has to make that deal.
John, the Europeans, and we heard Zelensky when he sat down with President Trump the last time in that earlier meeting where we all watched and it did not go well. They were concerned about the fact that we can't trust Vladimir Putin. So what are some of the backstops on the Ukrainian side if Russia were to do this again? Because even up until just now, Russia is still bombarding Ukraine with drones and with fire. So despite this meeting today, they are still ramping up.
I think you raise an excellent point. Vladimir Putin has been obsessed for decades with making Ukraine a vassal state, similar to what Belarus is right now. So that obsession is not going to go away anytime soon. I think the best we can hope for is to convince Putin to stop shooting for now. Of course, the threat of a third and follow-on war will always be there. At that point, it'll really be incumbent upon the United States and especially European countries to make Ukraine a so-called steel porcupine, tough to swallow, and to make sure the Russians know that any sanctions relief that happens in the event of a ceasefire or a peace deal can be snapped right back. But of course, the task at hand is putting the necessary pressure on Putin so that we even get to that ceasefire and peace agreement.
Fred, what kind of risk does President Trump face heading into the meeting today? There's another negative New York Times analysis saying that he's already conceded by actually talking to Mr. Putin. So what kind of pressures or what kind of risks does President Trump face with respect to not only the media here, which of course is going to be friendly no matter what happens,
right,
but more importantly with our European allies?
Well, I think this argument that Trump meeting with Putin is an unacceptable concession is really a stupid argument. American and Russian presidents should be meeting regularly. It's good for global security. It's good for U.S.-Russia relations. It was Biden who was wrong here, who did not even speak to Putin on the phone after February 2022. So Trump is restoring American foreign policy to where it should be. My view is even if this summit fails, Trump comes out a winner because he's now the major leader on the world scene to adjudicate crises, to make peace. There can be another summit if this one fails. If Trump holds his ground, that simply shows he's a strong leader. If he looks like he makes a good deal, it also make him look like a strong leader. But you can simply see everyone is coming to Trump to deal with these international crises. It simply shows he's exercising strong leadership, which I think the world really needs right now.
Yeah, excellent points there, Fred. That's great analysis.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more, Fred. I think Donald Trump, whether or not there is a ceasefire or not today or what results, the fact that he was able to bring Putin to the table is something we have not seen, at least in the United States. Putin hasn't been here in over 10 years. John, final thoughts here.
Well, I think what's really going to be important coming out of this, in the summit itself and coming out, is to show unity. I think President Putin is going to try to trick President Trump into thinking that it's actually Ukraine who's the problem. Ukraine's the impediment to peace. Of course, that's not true. I do not think President Trump is going to fall for that, but he needs to send that message very clearly to Putin, show him that we're united with our European allies and Ukraine, and make sure he knows he's still on the clock to make real steps toward peace, but also face the consequences that Trump threatened.
Yeah.
All right, John Hardie, Fred Fleitz, thank you so much for joining us.
Good to be here.